Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. On Sunday we looked at how to use the British Cavalry in Black Powder, and today I wanted to do the counterpoint video to that, and that is how to resist the British Cavalry. Now, I said in that video that I think the British Cavalry are very, very strong, arguably the best cavalry in the game. Certainly as a faction, I think the British have the best cavalry, if not the widest variety, and that is one of their key weaknesses and one that you can exploit. You know that you're going to be up against either light or medium cavalry. They don't have any cuirassiers. They've got the guard, but if you're playing a Peninsular war game, then they won't have that. Additionally, they don't have the core system that the French had. They've got separate divisions, so if you're playing an order of battle game, there's also the chance that they're not going to have any cavalry at all. Now, that's unlikely. Your opponent or the person who's designed the scenario is probably not going to want the British player to have no cavalry at all. But they will be massed in a specific place, whereas the French have got theirs scattered out throughout the units. Plus, they've got the cavalry brigades in reserve. Now, the key to the strength of the British cavalry is their gallop at everything / ferocious charge special rule. And that allows them to reroll all their fails to hit when they charge. And the key part of that sentence is when they charge. You need to try and stop them charging as much as possible. The best way of doing this is either charge them in the flank or charge them when they're shaken or disordered. Now, it's not very often that you're going to get a disordered opponent at the start of your turn. I can't really think of any way that you can do that. But you can definitely get them around the flank. Now, this is particularly useful if you are using ahistorical opponents. If you're using, say, the Russians, you can throw your Cossacks into the side there. That's quite handy. Or you can do as Rod Steiger commanded his troops to do. You'll match them with your Lancers. If you can get your Lancers in around the side, then that's quite a useful thing to do. Now, the British special rule makes them have to overrun. If they're KGL, they don't have to, but if they're not members of the King's German Legion, then they have to overrun. Now, I talked about in the video on Sunday that they have to overrun and it has to be in the forward quarter. That gives them a huge amount of leeway in order to move. They've got a 45-degree angle from the centre point, and they can go between 0.01 inches and 18 inches. So it's unlikely that your opponent is going to put himself in that terrible situation. I said that I would play by the spirit of the law rather than the letter, I think, and I would do a full move straight forward when I play it, and I stick by that. That can open up flanks and can allow the French cavalry in their own turn to charge you and get into you. That's a downside for the British, but that does rely on your opponent playing to the spirit of the rules, not the letter of the law, so don't rely on your opponent to do that. If they don't play it that way, they haven't done anything wrong, they are playing to the rules. So the easiest way of doing it, though, is to break through a forward unit and then overrun into the unit behind. Now, that's not necessarily as easy as it sounds, because you're going to need to be both supported and or a heavier unit. Now, again, if we look at the Peninsular War, you've got all the dragoons coming out of your ears in that combat. So you've got medium to heavy cavalry there, depending on how you classify them. And the British have got a lot of light cavalry, they're hussars. I said in the video on Sunday, I would probably take hussars over dragoons or dragoon guards. So, you know, that's mainly for the points differential and the ability to turn them into the KGL. So, because of that, your dragoons, your medium cavalry, they get D1 to their combat result, and that means that it all adds to your static res. Now, I've talked about static res before. That's your combat resolution that is baked in. You know before any dice are rolled that you're getting that bonus. Heavy cavalry and supports are the two obvious ones. Now, sometimes if you're extra heavy cavalry, if you're cuirassiers, that can be variable. You don't know if you're going to get a 1 or you might get 3. But you know that you're going to get at least 1. With the dragoons, you know you're definitely going to get 1. So if you can be supported on both flanks and the rear, that would be the ideal. Then you're going to get +4 before the combat even begins. The British cavalry are going to get more hits than you, but they're probably not going to get 4 more wounding hits than you. You've got to think, if you, on average, to fail 4 wounds with a 4+ save, you're going to have to be hit 8 times. Now, the opponent's probably not going to hit you 8 times. He probably doesn't even have 8 attacks. So, and that's just extra. That's assuming that you don't hit him at all. Now, obviously, it's a dice game. Dice can vary. But what it's about, as in real war, is it's about stacking the odds in your favour before you even declare the charge. Now, a lot of people think that Math Hammer, as it's known, is gamey. It's all right, that's what tournament players do. I say that's ludicrous. I say that's moronic. The reason is because, I mean, well, to be fair, maybe not the British cavalry generals, but most cavalry generals would look at their opponents and say, that's a fight we can win, and they would charge. Or they'd say, that's a fight we can't win, and they wouldn't charge. And they would use a whole host of factors for this. That's what wargaming is. Of course, those generals, they didn't absolutely know what was going to happen, so that's where the dice come in. So plan to take extra casualties, but have those supports there to help you out there. Also, the British cavalry will have less units, so that helps as well. You can soften the enemy up first using your artillery. If you're French, then you should have more artillery than the British. So you can spend the first couple of turns maybe plinking 1 or 2 wounds off that cavalry unit. Suddenly, that cavalry unit becomes a lot less scary. You've only got to get 1, and that stops them being able to charge or countercharge in future turns, and that can be absolutely huge. Remember, our goal here is to stop the enemy cavalry from being able to charge. Now, the British commander, he's not going to be stupid, so he's not just going to throw his light dragoons into your cuirassiers, willy-nilly. You've got to force him to do that, and the best way of doing that is to threaten his infantry. We've not done the infantry video yet, but as I said in the cavalry video, with most armies, the infantry hold the line and the cavalry deliver the fatal blow. It's the other way round for the British, sort of. The cavalry don't hold the line, but they support the British infantry, and it's those guys who do the killing. So, you need to threaten the infantry, get them to form square, really cut back on the enemy's firepower. While that unit's in square, it can be firing away at your dragoons or your hussars, one of your lighter units, but is not firing at your attack column. Your attack columns are coming up. They're the ones who are going to sweep that British infantry square away. So, by forcing the infantry into square, your opponent now has to do something to get rid of that threat, to get his infantry out of square, because remember, as long as his infantry are in charge range of that cavalry unit, they have to stay in square. And in that way, a single unit of chasseurs or hussars can tie up an entire brigade of British infantry. That's really, really useful. And it means that the British now has to do something to try and clear out that cavalry unit. That puts him in a position he doesn't want to be. He wants to be able to pick who he fights, where he fights, when he fights. He can be charging that hussar unit. He defeats them quite easily because he's got the better stats and the rerolls. But just behind them, you've got a brigade of dragoons, or you've got maybe a unit of Polish lancers, or maybe even just line lancers, and you can get that counter charge in your turn. Obviously, he's going to be able to counter charge, but if he's taken a couple of stamina already, then you'll be able to break him, and you can go back to threatening his infantry and keeping them in that square formation. So that's it for today. I like to keep these videos under 10 minutes. Please let me know if you like the idea of me doing a deep dive on the Sunday, and then a counterpoint, pointing out all the strong points of the unit on the Sunday, and then a counterpoint video on the Wednesday to talk about how you can defeat that. I've not gone into super details here. Obviously, a lot of it's going to depend on terrain and the position that you're in. But if you can get that British cavalry stationary, if you can stack your static res in a way that means that the British they're going to have to work too hard to defeat you, even with their rerolls, and that's the way of beating what should be a numerically inferior British cavalry. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I'm trying to keep these Wednesday ones under 10 minutes. Please let me know if you enjoy this idea of having the Sunday night videos as, the how to use the British cavalry or Russian infantry or whatever it is, and then a counterpoint video on the Wednesday to give you some ideas to defeating them. Obviously, it's not going to be as in-depth as doing the full unit breakdown that I'm hopefully starting to do more often. And, I'll only know if you like this kind of content if you let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.